2020 was brought to you by coronavirus, along with a slew of biblical curses, quarantine, the American election, and my very own personal disaster, homeschooling. You know, that old, profound saying never rang truer. It takes a village to raise a child, but a whole vineyard to homeschool one. I mean, what the pangolin was up with 2020? Well, there's nobody better to discuss this than our panelists. In this very topical yet timeless discussion, can there be light relief in dark times? Our panelists are: Amitava Kumar is a writer, journalist and a professor. His latest novel, A Time Outside This Time, will be out in 2021. Gill Hornby is a best-selling author and journalist. Her latest work, Miss Austen, is being developed as a TV series. Moni Mohsin is an author and journalist. She is the writer of the best-selling social satire, Diary of a Social Butterfly. Gauri Sinh will chair the session. Miss Sinh is a busy mother and used to head the lifestyle and entertainment supplement, Bombay Times. She has also written 3 books. Over to you, Miss Sinh.
Thank you, Suruchi, for that. Moni, Amitava, Gill, I want to say good evening, but this particular session is playing across 3 time zones in 3 different countries. So I'm going to go with a very warm welcome. Welcome also to all of you watching this. This session, Brighter Books, can be interpreted on many levels, not just to mean light relief in dark times, but the tools a writer uses to provide that relief. Moni, I'm going to begin with you. We all laugh when we read something that amuses us. But they say writing satire is not an easy process at all. To highlight grave, deep or burning issues with humor or irony, how was it for you? And how much of your actual experience shaped your work? This is in context to your Social Butterfly series, where you use a high society maven to underline deep political issues. I believe glamour called The Return of the Butterfly, Bridget Jones meets Jane Austen. Tell us about
that. The comparison with Jane Austen, although extremely flattering, is not entirely deserved. I think they made that comparison when I wrote my novel Tender Hooks, which was about a lady who's trying to, with the same butterfly, social butterfly, is trying to help her loser cousin get married after he's been ditched by his last wife. But I think what Glamour failed to recognize is that cricket is only the second national sport in the subcontinent. The first, of course, is matchmaking. And we are all very busy matchmaking at all time. We even matchmake during a cricket match. So you might, get into conversation with somebody sitting next to you and saying, "To aap kya karte? What do you do then?" And in typical sort of subcontinental fashion, the next question would be, "And how much is your pay?" So yes, I take a lot out of my own life and my own experience, and I come from a family where humor is prized very highly, and also a family of great mimics, so everybody's always watching and listening. So I think I'm listening all the time when I'm with people, and I'm sure all writers are. They're switched on and they're watching and they're listening. I am listening to the more ridiculous things. I'm sort of more aware of those. I am more, my antenna are fine-tuned for those things. So yes, a lot of my own personal experience and my life goes into my writing, but I'm sure that is true of my fellow panelists as well.
You said writers are all switched on, which is very, I'm going to come back to that later, pertaining to what Amitava says, but I'm going to bring in Amitava now.
May I just make a very quick interjection?
Yes,
I was listening, I was watching a documentary on the New Yorker, the editor for the cartoons of the New Yorker. And he was asked, he said, what do you understand by being funny? And he said, "I think of it as being awake."
That's actually, yeah.
So just an aside.
So I'm just actually pertaining exactly to that. I was watching Amitava. Amitava, your work is, a lot of it is narrative non-fiction. And, you can use it to convey irony and, as one reviewer put it, idiosyncrasies. But what I want to know from you is, when I was watching one of your interviews, you described your writing as a raid on the real. And you used Henry James, I think, for that. But can you interpret that for our audiences? And to take that a little further, a raid on the real, I want to know, what do you see an author's role as being today? Is it really to offer perspective or brightness, as it were? Or is it more personal or, intimate, perhaps selfish? I have a point of view. I'm going to say something. I have something to say.
Thank you for that question. When Moni was speaking and you said, "Oh, this brings me, to a question about Amitava," I thought, because she had just said that to write or to be funny is to be awake. You said, "Let's go to Amitava, who is barely awake. It is 8 o'clock in the morning." So I said,
8 in the morning. Yes.
I thought, okay, she's coming to me. Listen, I think by raid in the real that you do address the complexity of life, which has tragedy, but even the tragedy, for example, if you think of what's happening in the US right now, it's quite tragic, it's absurd, but it's also therefore comic. For example, Rudy Giuliani, Trump tweeted that there would be a press conference to expose what was happening in Pennsylvania. And he said there will be a press conference at Four Seasons. So journalists rushed to the hotel Four Seasons, and then Trump tweeted again, Four Seasons total landscaping. So everyone had to go to some place which was a landscaping business between an adult bookstore and what was the other
Garden center.
Garden
center. Garden center.
It was a cremation. The other business was a cremation, which appealed to my Hindu soul. And so what I'm trying to say to you is that even amidst what is a really dark happening, life offers you comedy. And I believe that a writer, since you asked about a writer's responsibility, I believe that a writer who only attends to one of those two things is making a mistake. That a writer's responsibility, in other words, even amidst tragedy, is to attend to the comedy of human affairs. And while being comic, touch on the deep pathos of life, really.
That's very interesting, actually, because you say comedy of human affairs, and I'm going to bring Gill in here. Your debut novel, Gill, The Hive, gave me the chills. I'll tell you why. Because, Agatha Christie, one of her creations, Miss Marple, and I'm going to paraphrase her, she said, people are the same everywhere. So when I was reading it, I saw a resonance in cliques here, and you've not set it in India. For those who don't know about The Hive, it's about a group of ferocious primary school mothers and, their relationships with each other, their interactions. In fact, I believe one of your characters has said it's more useful to face the Taliban before meeting these mothers. That kind of ferocity. I want to ask you, is it easier, which basically brings me to the use of women observing women's wiles. And I want to know, was it easier to write intimately or with candor about these women because you are a woman? Or do you think that writing in this way should transcend gender?
I think in that particular instance, I think you had to be a woman. I find it quite interesting when I'm observing women, and if I discuss it afterwards, say with my husband or one of my sons, they've been blind to the whole thing. They've been in a different place. They haven't witnessed the interactions and so on that I have. They just simply haven't understood the kind of ecosphere of what was going on. But I think we become very attuned from school onwards. I went to an all-girls school, then I had 4 children, and for about 1,000 years I was at the school gates meeting them at various different schools, endless different cliques. They were all the same. There was always the same sort of roles. And I think when men go into that situation. They absolutely don't see the peril that you can get into with that. And also, I think they're impervious because women behave like that when they are with women. They don't, well, once you throw men into a social situation, everything changes completely. But and I think it's probably exactly the same for men, but you know, Jane Austen never wrote a scene with only men in it because she said, how could she possibly know what that was like? And I'm exactly the same. We don't know what men are like with each other. We don't have that superpower when they're together. And they don't have the superpower when we're together. But we definitely alter each other. And it's really the hive. Although it's the story of a primary school calendar and year and people going, you know, the children going through it and the adults going through it, it's really a transfer of power novel. The power goes from one queen bee to another queen bee. And that does happen. And it's very bloody when it does.
I'm going to ask you a cheeky question. Did your life influence some of that? Were you queen bee? Were you minion?
I have never been a queen bee, honestly. I just don't have whatever it is that it takes. It's some pheromone, I think, that certain women give off that make other women follow them. It's absolutely from the life. It is from my 25 years experience of having children at school. And some of it is actual word for word, actually. There's just occasional themes that happened to me that were too good to throw away. So they're all in there, sort of taken down at dictation speed. And so I was kind of nervous when it was being read by everybody I knew, because there are monsters in it, like there are monsters in life. But what I noticed is that monsters don't know they're monsters. Otherwise, perhaps they wouldn't even be monsters, because they don't, and because they didn't recognize themselves, they were absolutely fine with it. Even if they'd actually said the things that I'd heard them say, or things along those lines, or done it, they just don't get it. That's what makes you a monster, I think.
You know, you're talking about monsters, but there are certain ideas that you turn over on its head. You know, I'm going to read, especially when it comes to female interaction, and I really want to bring this up specifically. This is Georgie, who you said you identify with, as opposed to the other mothers, of course. She might not know everything about the female condition, she would admit that, but this much she did know. She knew what not to talk about with her fellow women. And number one on that list was any suggestion, not even the merest hint of marital or domestic contentment. Not sorrow, contentment. Gill, does that mean that you see women only as being competitive around each other primarily?
No, not only. I mean, I do sympathise with Georgie, but not entirely. No, not only. But smugness, I think, is something that the female sex is very, very highly attuned to.
Ouch.
And it's fatal. It's absolutely fatal to exhibit anything that might be thought of as smugness. And especially in that pressure cooker world of having small children, when there's so much comparison going on between us and between our offspring, I think it is best not to sit there and talk about what a genius your child is, or, you know, its ravishing beauty, or whatever, because I think it gets you into trouble.
You mentioned smugness. I'm going to read a para from Amitava's novel, A Matter of Rats. And he's talking about smugness in a different context. He's saying, and I found that really interesting, he's saying, writers often marshal inordinate zeal when portraying the misery of the downtrodden and the oppressed. It is only a form of narcissism, the writer enamored of his or her sensitive self, faithfully recording the pain of others. No doubt I am guilty of this too, but I plead equal fondness for folly, pleasure, guile, greed, and hypocrisy, hence the rats. I'm going to address this question and take it a little bit forward, Amitav, before you answer this and interpret this, to include all three of you, and I'm going to go one by one, because all of you were journalists before you were authors. And I want to know, journalism is not, a lot of it involves reporting on reality without the frills, without the brightness, as it were. Did being a journalist inform your craft as it is now? But Amitava, first tell me about the Guile.
Yes. I don't know. I mean, in that statement, I was trying to say that one shouldn't simply be wedded to an idea of representing abjectness. That even in the heart of abjectness, there's something else. And there's all sorts of operations of the human heart that is very interesting to me. Let me say this way. Even in the middle of COVID, just looking at news from India, you would find, of course, amongst the, the stupid and misguided action of the government that imposed a brutal lockdown without arranging for food or essential services for a large number of people. Even in those contexts, you would find something else happening. For example, ANI had a headline, "Mother sends son out for groceries. He returns with wife." What was that about? Well, it was pure story. Because if you go into the details, the son had gotten married to someone. This was in a poor family. I think they were from Bihar or nearby UP. And the woman he had married, who was probably from a different caste, they were staying in another building, but the landlord there, because of COVID, shut it down. So now, the poor bride needed a place to stay, and the son thought it was important very quickly to disclose to his mother that he was married. But just the headline from the world of journalism is so interesting, And you have a great evidence of that in literature when, let's say, V.S. Naipaul, writing in a house for Mr. Biswas, talks about his father being trained in headlines, And it's all about craft. It's about presenting life's story in form of a catchy headline or something that makes you laugh at life. So that was that. What did journalism train me? I think the world is much more radical than certainly my limited imagination. In fact, I would say than writers' limited imagination. The world offers radical surprises. Can I tell you? Can I entertain you guys with a little joke very quickly? On the day the elections were being held, it was very, very depressing. So I had a Zoom call with some writer friends. And Kiran Desai, who wrote The Inheritance of Loss, looked especially sad. And I said, "Kiran, why are you so sad?" And then I turned to my fellow other writers who were on the Zoom and I said, can we tell some jokes? What is the last good joke you heard? And my friend Teju Cole said about COVID. And, he said, well, this comes from Russia. And he said the Russians have a way of addressing immediately what is political and also what is sad, but also humorous or comical. And he said, a man gets into a cab in Moscow and the driver says, "Sorry about the smell. I was sanitizing everything. I hope you appreciate that." The passenger says, "Don't worry about it. I have not smelled anything for the last 2-3 days."
Moni.
Yeah, now go on to Moni or Gill.
Yeah, I'm going to go on to Moni and ask the same question. Did your journalism past influence or, interact with your craft right now as a writer and author?
Well, the first thing that journalism did for me, and that was very important and it has stayed with me, is a very prosaic, banal thing, but very important for writers, which was to finish what you have started. So
very important.
If you have to write that piece and you have to do it, you have to finish it and hand it in. That is the most important thing and I think when you are by yourself and when you don't have a particular deadline, you can stretch your work to fill your whole life and that discipline is one of the most important things as a journalist that I learned, was to start it, to finish it, and to think also of whether you are making sense. It can't be entirely indulgent, because when you're writing for a newspaper, you are given a brief as well. So you have to give yourself a brief when you're writing too. It can change when you're writing. I mean, when you're writing fiction, the brief can change halfway. You can chuck that brief and start another, but you do have to have something in mind when you start. That was one thing. The other thing, as Amitava just said, is that journalism, I was not a reporter, I was a feature writer.
Yes.
And I was a columnist. So I met a lot of people who are not necessarily just the movers and shakers in politics, but I met a lot of artists, I met a lot of artisans, I met a lot of doctors, I met a wide range of people. And for that I'm deeply grateful, because in the subcontinent you can get very stuck in the clique into which you are born. It's very difficult to get out of that unless your work takes you out of it. Social strata are very distinct. But journalism allowed me to see a very wide variety and meet with a very wide variety of people and also learn of their experiences. I also did quite a lot of journalism with regard to conservation and environment, and that took me geographically out of my space, and that was very interesting too, and it shaped my understanding of the world. For that I owe journalism a huge debt, because it took me out of myself, it took me out of my space, it took me out of my class, it took me out of my comfort zone.
Would you agree, Gill?
Yes, I would. I would very much agree on the first point that journalism is proof there's no such thing as writer's block, actually, because there's never half an empty page in a newspaper, because everybody has to deliver, and we do deliver. So why are we so different with novels? Why are we so different with long form? It's entirely a matter of discipline upon oneself. But also I would say, yes, just journalism is telling a story, and writing a novel should be, the best way to write a novel is to write the story of something that has already happened. So it is a finished product. You know where you're going. You know what the end is. You are narrating what occurred. It's in the past. It's happened. I'm always slightly dubious about people who say they're writing a novel and they don't know where it's going. They don't know where it's going to take them, you know, and so on. And obviously one does tack whilst one's going through and change course. But really what you should be doing is, I think, is narrating something that has occurred. It's only occurred in your head, but it has occurred. And then you have the sense of directive, and and you have a sense of shape of story. I think journalism is very good for the shape of the story. It's a short, you know, it's a small scale shape, but it's a very good discipline to work within it.
Yeah, I think what I wanted to do was in terms of reality versus brightness, or your own perspective on it. I'm going to go back to what Moni said about social strata. I was going through some of your work, and there was this interview you did where you went into rules of satire, and there was something very, I have to say this, I don't know if this is verbatim, but you said, only the wealthy deserve to be laughed at. And you said, have a go at the rich and the influential, leave the ordinary people alone. I want to know if you still stand by that, and your reasons for that in the context of brighter books or books that offer perspective.
I do think that it is easier to make fun of wealthy people because of all those rich people problems are so easily mocked. They are generally more ridiculous as well, because they are less, they have much more room for error than ordinary people do, and therefore they are more prone to making those kind of mistakes. I don't mean to say that poor people can't be made fun of, or that ordinary people can't be made fun of. They can, but it is easier to make fun of rich people. They offer a more delicious kind of target.
Ouch. I'm going to move to Amitava and ask him, actually in the context of mistakes, and this is lifting this completely out of context to what Moni said, but you said in a recent interview that you encouraged writers to be opportunistic, to be cannibalistic even, and to ambush time. And I think it was, I'm not sure if it was Hemingway who said stealing from experience. So to expand that ambush to even people around you, don't you think it's messy stealing from experience? Couldn't there be mistakes, taking something private, using it as fodder to create a brighter perspective?
Yeah, I mean it is. But you know,
so where do you draw the line?
Don't draw the line. I don't draw the line. I hope to stumble into mistake all the time, you know, and not from a feeling of righteousness, but simply from a feeling of that's the part of the deal. Just last week, a woman I had studied with did say that it was bullshit, she used the word, to stand by that dictum, and I totally respect that. I was telling her about how Colm Toibin, the Irish writer, said that you must tell the stories that people reveal to you, even if you know, you're breaking confidence. He said, if you have ethical reservations about this, I'll be happy to write you a letter of recommendation to join law school. You have no business being a writer. It's an extreme view,
yes.
And maybe it's, but I kind of like it, because especially if you're writing about your own people,
yes,
as I was doing in A Matter of Rats when I was writing about Patna, I wanted to, you know, I didn't want to have some sort of a sub-nationalism protecting me from breaking confidences. I think what's really important, and this goes back to what Moni was also talking about a moment ago, is you have to mock power, and power holds on to its authority with by such ridiculous means that it's important to unveil it all the time. For example, the Prime Minister of a country that will remain unnamed said that at 9 p.m. everyone has to step out, and for 9 minutes you have to either clap or draw or light a diya, and that COVID would go away. And you have to mock that, especially because the Prime Minister of this unnamed large democracy, his followers said that, NASA has discovered that in these 9 minutes, the temperature rose so much because of all the candles that were lit that there was an immediate disappearance of COVID-19. So you have to mock this. And how shall I put it? I want to break confidence. I want to be opportunistic about all these moments where people are fed poison, and do so in a way that is most compelling. And if humor is the way, humor shall be the way, you know?
You know, you're talking about prime ministers, and I'm going to take that idea forward and speak to Moni about her new book, which is The Impeccable Integrity of Ruby R, which is going to be released shortly, Moni. You have a prime minister figure who rose from the ranks of being a film star, and part of the reason that I think he won or wins is the fact that he has such adulation. And we all know that in terms of adulation, there are only two professions really that command that kind of godlike devotion. One is film stars, the other is cricketers. So, you know, when you write satire or irony, often you caricature people. As Amitava said, it's important to disseminate in many ways. I want to know, did you channel anyone in reality in this, using this Prime Minister character in your new book?
I did. I think you've missed out one important category in your list of categories, which is reality. No, reality TV stars now, you know. There's
TV, yeah.
Yeah, so there is, and what people think, who people think they know, just because somebody has been beamed on their televisions into their sitting rooms, they think that they know this person now. They think that they're on intimate terms with this person because they think that they have gone behind the scenes with this person. I started writing this book in 2017, and the Harvey Weinstein scandal had just happened, and I was thinking about that. And I also was thinking about the rise of alpha male authoritarian figures in the world today. And I was trying to mix the two, and because Harvey Weinstein was also an extremely powerful man in his own sphere. He was also an alpha male. Everybody was frightened of him. Nobody could call him out. Same way we see with the Republican Party now. A lot of people probably feel that what he's doing is wrong, but they can't call him out because they're frightened. And I was also looking at how trolls on Twitter, etc., and social media work. So this character was as a composite of many people that I saw around me at this time, and I took a little bit from all of them, powerful figures. So I took.
So there's not just the one. There's no one.
It's not just the one. I'm afraid my starting point actually was not with an authoritarian figure, but a figure who we all know, who is Bill Clinton and his episode with Monica Lewinsky. And I thought to myself, if that happened in the subcontinent, how would that play out? And so my character is a little bit, a little bit of the playful, cheeky rogue, which is Boris Johnson. It's a little bit of the, the reality TV star, which is Trump. It is a little bit of Amitabh Bachchan as well in the 1990s. It is a little bit of Imran Khan. It is a little bit of Putin who thinks it's important to show himself riding on a horse without his shirt on, out in the steppe. I mean, why does he feel the need to do that? He's trying to give you a message about the sort of hyper masculinity that is assumed in these positions. So it was lovely. I got to make a little potpourri of all these characters and present him as my dear leader.
I want to know, do you always, when you write satire, there's always fear of backlash, right? Because in many ways, if that is your role, if you're trying to kind of disseminate and reveal things which are and should not be, there might be, because increasingly, also in the context of writer books, it's an increasingly humorless world right now that we're heading towards.
Yes.
Do you fear backlash, Moni?
Of course I do. Of course I do.
And does that inform your writing?
You try to put it aside, because if you thought about it all the time, you wouldn't be able to write. But it is part of your job to make people feel a little bit uncomfortable, to think about their situation, because our own situation, because if you didn't, you really wouldn't be doing your job. And of course I am frightened, of course I do feel worried, of course, all of us do. But then you also have to take a few risks, and you also have to, as Amitava was saying, if you don't speak truth to power, then you're not doing your job. That is the job of the satirist.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, backlash, I want to go back to Gill on this and talk about backlash in a different way, because your new book, the book that released this year, Miss Austen, talks about Jane Austen's sister. And you are actually creating something and putting it out there, and there is a whole world of Jane Austen fans. Wasn't that intimidating? Did you fear backlash, or did you fear tackling the Austen legacy through the eyes of her sister?
I haven't actually had a backlash, which amazes me. I mean, I was jolly scared. I think I was really helped. I'd had this idea to write about Cassandra because I'd become rather obsessed with her, and about how the bad rap she's had over the years. And I had this idea to write a book about Cassandra. I wasn't commissioned to do it. I was just writing it sort of out of my own interest. And I started with Cassandra, and I kept getting to the point where Jane had to come in and walk and talk and have opinions and behave badly and all sorts of things. And I got very nervous about it. I kept putting it back and back and back. And in the end, I just said to myself, look, probably nobody's ever going to read this, apart from my husband who'll tell me to put it away. So I just sort of started and carried on. And then it got a publisher here and a publisher in the States, so on. And it got to the point where it had to go out to Jane Austen experts. I think it's a very particular world, the Jane Austen world, because actually everybody is beyond nice and supportive of everybody else working within it. And I can't think of another academic subject actually where that pertains. They're normally a kind of snake pit. But I mean, one of the immense liberties I took was I invented 12 letters written by Jane Austen, you know, that were sort of hidden. And my very gung-ho American editor was determined that this should be sent to Deirdre LeFay, who is the woman who edited the official edition of the letters, who was the most brilliant woman, but also really not a sufferer of fools in any way. And she was fine with it. And once I got past her, well, I thought it'd probably be all right, you know. But it is difficult because Jane, one of the things Cassandra did was destroy all the evidence of Jane's life, really, anything that was vaguely controversial, which, with the result that Jane herself, as we see her, is this very, she's a perfect blank, and anybody who loves her can just believe what they like about who she was, and that she's a bit like sort of God or somebody, in that she is to you whatever you want her to be. And there's clearly evidence that she was not Lizzie Bennet and not any of the things that people think she was. So yeah, I just waded in there, and
you were appreciated.
Yeah.
And you appreciate it. But which brings me actually to a larger question there. Who do you write for? Amitava, you know, in one of your recent interviews, you're talking about how you want to offer more than words. You write, there's this book on style, I think. Every day I write a book, and you say you've included a recipe. And I think what you share in common is with that is Gill herself has included recipes in the Hive. I want to know about this inclusion of recipes, but I want to go turn by turn. So, and also want to bring in Moni, because Moni, you know, when you write, and it's hilarious some of the stuff that you write in the Butterfly series when they talk, you know, talking about the heir to the throne, and you spell it H-A-I-R, and then you bring in you know, Hindi words. So who are you writing for? Are you writing for the Globe? Will they understand Hindi? Are you writing for yourself? Are you writing? I'm going to go to Amitava first, go to Gill, and then you. So Amitava.
Acha, don't start India-Pakistan fight there, because I think Moni is using an Urdu word, by the way. She's not using Hindi. But anyway, Acha. Can I just say something else very quickly, because I was interested in what my fellow panelists were saying about backlash. You know, it's a very bad situation in India.
Yes.
Intellectuals are in jail. People like Arun Ferreira from Mumbai, Vernon Gonzalez, Sudha Bharadwaj. People who have in any way expressed dissent against the government have been put in jail. And so how does one write about that and quote a backlash? And I feel that because this panel is in some ways looking at the bright side, here's a little bright side story from Turkey, which I read, that a prisoner goes to the prison library and says, "Do you have this book?" And the prison librarian says, "No, we don't have the book, but we do have the author." You know, and I think that's the situation that is arising in India. So it will be very interesting. I've been trying to write about news, and it will be very interesting to see how people do react to criticism or to dissent, especially when it is aimed at the rulers.
Are you anticipating backlash?
I think, yes. I mean, once Moni was in Jaipur, that's another year when I saw her. But one year we had to leave after some of us read from Salman Rushdie's book. We were asked to leave that day, before it even got too late, within hours, because we had read a book that was banned. So in this case, however, I think there has been a great rightward turn in places like US and certainly in India. And I think there should be at once a fear of backlash and at the same time a resolve to counter it in ways through solidarity among writers, but also with people that you are writing for. So who am I writing for? I don't know. I certainly hope that I'm read by people who think like me, but also by people who do not think like me. So that if I have a figure, for example, again of a prime minister who will not be named, who says that, science has been a part of our life. Ganesh having an elephant head is a sign that we had plastic surgery in India in ancient times. As if A, Ganesh is a real historical figure, and B, that elephant head is a sign of medical achievement, then people should be able to see through it. Other people who are not, who have not signed up for the Communist Party or anything, but they are just because they have a rational mind. So I'm writing for people, hopefully, and I think humor sometimes helps, hopefully, to address people who are not already in my camp.
Even if we're in a humorless world, and we are increasingly heading towards a humorless world, we would continue to do that.
Yes.
Okay, Moni?
I think we are like the band on the Titanic sometimes, you have to keep playing. I see that as my role. I have to keep playing. And today, truth is the most contested idea. Emotion is all. And we have to push back against that. I think from the subcontinent, certainly we feel this sense that if, we have to hold the line. With regard to telling stories, you try and tell a truthful story and you try and tell it first to yourself. My first reader is myself. I have to find something that interests me. I have to go the length with it. So it has to be something which is of interest to me. It has to be something which I can bear to live with for 2, 3, 4 years, however long it takes to finish it. So my first reader is myself. After that, as Amitava was saying, you hope that you will be able to reach out to people who think like you and also people who don't think like you, because you are hoping that people will pick up your work not necessarily because they agree with you, but because they're interested in what you have to say.
Jill, would you agree with that?
Yes, I think I write for myself. I mean, I couldn't possibly write something out of character, something that I wouldn't want to read myself. And so I'm kind of criticizing myself all the way through writing about whether I'm going to be bored at this point. I think I aim to be read by people who have the same approach to life that I have, really, which is that everybody is interesting, people have their own story, there's comedy in everything. Life is never unrelentingly gloomy, and the difference, what makes us human, is the fact that we can have a laugh.
And who like recipes, the ones that you write about?
And like recipes.
Amitav never did answer that. Why recipes?
Yeah. Sorry. You ask so many interesting questions that I have to focus on one or two. But yes, the recipe is for. I want to tell Moni and Gill that a writer was coming to my town and he asked where he could eat, and I wasn't in town, so I said, well, I would have invited you to my house and I'd have given you this lovely grilled shrimp that I think I have learned now to make wonderfully, and it has to be washed down with gin, Bombay Sapphire gin, because we are properly post-colonial. And he said, oh, I'm sorry that I'm missing it, can you send me a recipe? So I wrote how I make that, But I also was thinking that because he's a writer, I should be thinking a little bit about how this is all about craft, whether it's a recipe or it is a story. And so I included it in the book, which is on style, because I wanted to say everything is a story. And you have to think about structure and tone and voice and pacing, which is not news to all of you, but to the people who are listening and are interested, check out How to Make Shrimp and How to Make Stories.
Okay, so I've been told that it's 5 minutes to the audience question, so I'm just going to put in one last question to all of you. You know, Moni's book, one of the characters take on a good author, the new book, the one coming out, they say, looks reality straight in the face, but with compassion. Moni, is that your take too, and would you add humor to that mix?
Humor is compassion, I believe. There is such a thing as wit, which can be cruel, but I think humor is generally good-humored. It is fun without the pinch. But, you know, I can't help myself. Sometimes I am quite sharp at the edges, and I try and be compassionate. But sometimes, as Amitava says, things are so ridiculous and so extraordinarily bizarre that you can't help but mock them. And there my compassion goes out of the window, and I take the scalpel out and I wield it.
Ouch.
So,
But I'm expanding on that, and therefore, you know, just as a last to Gill and to Amitav, what do you think, where do you think a writer's responsibility lies, therefore? With themselves or with the audience?
Gill?
I would say with entertainment. Completely.
In the context of writer books.
Yeah, absolutely. Usually, you know, well, I mean, even a gloomy book should offer some sort of entertainment, but really, we are here to share stories. That's what it's about, and to divert people and take them into another world temporarily. And I would say that's where our responsibility is.
Well said. Amitav?
You know, even what is ridiculous often fades from memory. And I think if you ask me about responsibility, though that's not a word I really like, I would say it is recording the incessant, relentless flow of ridiculousness that is important. So I'm underlining the recording part. And again, for young people or others who are watching us, I keep a little notebook like this all the time, you know, and I note down things that, so for example, if you don't mind, I'll read one line from it.
Please do.
So, Swami Chak, so this is where I note down things that are appearing in the news. So I want in my novels or in my non-fiction to be there the steady record of the human decline, of the what I call the relentless human decline into pure folly. Here's an example.
And you're telling us this in a session called The Brightness of Books.
Say, bilkul. Swami Chakrapani Maharaj, president of Hindu Mahasabha, on Friday said, cow urine and cow dung can be used for treating novel coronavirus disease. He also said that a special yajna will be performed to kill the novel coronavirus and end its effect on the world. So if you guys are there, I would like one of you journalists to go and find out from Swami Chakrapani Maharaj, was the yajna performed or not? Because people are dying.
Entertainment or reality? Okay, I've got 1 minute for the Q&A session, so I'm going to kind of squeeze in one last question. You know, what you just spoke about, Amitav, it's like the weight of the world in the face of entertainment, in the face of Gill's entertainment theory. Do you ever suffer from the weight of the world so you can't give into the brightness of books?
No. I don't, because, you know, I send my children to school and then I sit down to write for a couple of hours. So I do not suffer from any of that. Because I also have to, as a professor, teach my students that they have to write every day. So I feel to invoke your word, responsibility, I feel that I have to continue to comment with some degree of severity, and which also has a touch of humor about the condition of our world.
Gill, very quickly, and then I'll move to Moni. Do you feel the weight of the world, or decide to take a breather, or in your role as an author, or?
No, no. I'm very lucky actually, because I'm buried in the 19th century now on the novel I just wrote and the novel I'm writing now. And I tell you what, it's a relief to get back there every morning.
It's a whole different set of issues, isn't it? Like
yeah.
women, etc., etc. Okay, but I'm not going to discuss that now. I'm going to go quickly to Moni before we move into audience questions. Moni, weight of the world and brightness of books.
My present book is, as you know, is slightly dark in places, and so I've had to sort of struggle with that darkness as well a little bit. But the big brightness in my life is that I managed to finish it, and whenever I finish a novel, I feel extremely bright.
Right. Amen. I'm going to leave it at that, three of you, and I'm going to move to audience questions. It's been wonderful actually talking to you all. It's very insightful. And I'm going to go straight actually now into audience questions so we don't run out of time. So this question is from Emma Montero to Moni. Your butterfly series are fabulously funny and sad and true. How difficult is it to walk the line between contempt and gentle humor, considering butterfly is such a gauche, funny creature? Moni?
Thank you for that question. I take my cue from the butterfly. You know, I don't want to sound pretentious here and say that, you know, you have to enter into a state to write or whatever. But sometimes when you enter into a character's way of thinking and speaking, you access the character's emotions and you can access their take on life, and that helps you say, and that helps you become the character in a way, and you put yourself to a side and you start channeling reality through that person's perspective after that. Once I enter into that butterfly world, once I enter into her mindset, then after that it's not me any longer, it's her, and I take my cue entirely from her. She is very stupid, as you know, as well, but at the same time she's brave and she's loyal, and she has some virtues, and both of them are, and you know, her virtues and her stupidity are constantly at play with one another, and sometimes one triumphs, sometimes the other triumphs, as with all of us, as with all, you know, certainly with me, and so that is how I write her.
Emma, I hope that answered your question. The next one is from Preeti Palat for Amitava. Do you find women with a sense of humor more attractive than those who haven't? That's an odd question.
That's exactly why I like Moni so much.
Okay, and we've just been talking about truth to power and men with masculinity, and there it jumps that question. Okay, so Jenna Sen for Gill. They say women are bad joke tellers. So does it follow that fewer than more women can write humor well?
No, I don't think women are bad joke tellers. Anyway, I don't think the source of humour really is jokes. I think it's wit. I think the funniest writer ever is Jane Austen. I can't think of a man who's written as well as she has, or as humorously about normal life. So I would defend to the hilt the female sense of humour. I often think much, much wittier. I think the whole format of telling jokes or of being a stand-up comedian or any of that stuff, I think that is a very male, that is all designed to for the male benefit. But I think in conversation, I always find women can be fantastically amusing, and on the page, I mean, you know, just brilliant. Nancy Mitford, Jane Austen, nobody's funnier than those two.
I'm going to ask Moni to weigh in on that too, since you're a woman. Moni?
I think women have to be funny after all. I mean, you must have a great sense of humor to put up with thousands of years of patriarchy. You know, it's to live with men, you have to have a great sense of humor. Because
No, I agree. I agree.
Oh, lovely.
I also think, by the way, that at least in this country, in America, women are great stand-up comedians, for example, you know. I have a lifelong crush on Tina Fey, who is wonderful. Other people like Sarah Silverman or Kate McKinnon are politically also enormously astute, and their jokes are very funny. I watch them all the time. And also writers. For example, I mean, in the Indian context, I don't think there's a more political writer than Arundhati Roy. But she can be enormously funny in the way she deflates male egos and male power. I think that's great. Yeah.
Moni, I cut you off when I moved to Amitava. Is there something more you needed to add to that before I move to the next question?
No, even people like Nora Ephron, people like Dorothy Parker.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, they're just astonishing, astonishing. And also, you know, in my limited experience of the world, women tend not to take themselves as seriously as men do. Which helps them, I think, to look at the world and to operate in it in a way which allows them to see the funny side of things.
I think that's very insightful. Question for Amitava. Do you think it's cruel to see humor in strange places like at a funeral or in war-torn places?
No, it's not. I mean, a great example there is Chekhov, you know. And humor is the wrong word. It's really comedy, you know. Even in the midst of someone's desperate appeal for a shred of cabbage, how someone is employing a little bit of guile or even a little bit of self-inflation. I think people like Chekhov are masters of that. And of course Jane Austen too, you know. So, no, to be alive to all the registers of human existence is a writer's job. So even in the midst of a funeral, even in the midst of, yes, I mean, I just taught a piece, in fact, 2 weeks ago to my students. There is a man who is, it's by a writer called Sean Wilsey, who writes for the London Review of Books, and it is his account of being a greeter at a memorial service for the employees of Cantor Fitzgerald, who died in hundreds when the plane crashed in the Twin Towers. Now, sadness piercing a man's body as he emerges from the elevator, but at the same time, everything else that is rife with comedy because it is ridiculous or stupid or, you know, that is what this writer is paying attention to, and you can find it actually on the web. So, London Review of Books, Sean Wilsey, The Greeter. Check out the point I'm trying to make, where even in the midst of piercing sorrow, there is the comedy of human manners, you know.
So it's 2 minutes to end of session. There are more questions, but I can't go through them all. I'm just going to go through the one that...
May I just make one point here?
Yes.
I think it is humor that makes the tragedy bearable. You know, it's the comedy that makes the tragedy bearable. It is comedy that makes life bearable.
It's how we cope.
It helps you put things into perspective. It gives you a little bit of detachment and distance. It allows you to look at multiple things at the same time. That is what comedy does. It's not for particular times in your life. It is for all time. It's for life. Comedy is for life. And a writer's job, as Amitava was saying, is to see that comedy at all times and in all places.
Also, humor is a means of communication between us. And at things like funerals, it is one of the levels on which we reach out and connect with one another, is to find the same thing funny or to just see the comedy in the situation. It's a coping mechanism.
Wise words to end this session by. I'm just quickly going to go into what all of you would like to read on a dark day. There's a question. So quickly, could you just Literally, I have 1 minute before the end of this.
PG Woodhouse.
And that's from Jasmine Panika. PG
There's
Woodhouse.
There's a book that has just come out called Garner's Quotations, where a New York Times critic collects quotations, including those, for example, yesterday I was reading by Dorothy Parker. The Sparkle of Wit by various writers is so available there. It's wonderful. I recommend it highly.
Moni?
I like Nancy Mitford. My favorite book, I always go back to it, is Love in a Cold Climate.
Yeah.
Love that.
Agreed.
So I hope it's answered that question. Thank you all so much, Gill, Moni, Amitava, for delightful conversation, and Tata Lit Live as well. The tech team especially, thank you all. I'm going to hand it back to Suruchi, who's here.
Thank you so much for that enjoyable session. We'd like to thank our sponsors, title sponsor Tata, session sponsor Tidal Waves. We have a session coming up which is slightly opposite in theme to this, which is No Birds Sing. Why are dark themes so attractive? On 21st of November, 11 a.m. Hope to see you there too.